So this is, we have to have it in our context in South Africa, and I think Marinda will probably agree. We need that focus, because the researchers have got to critically self-reflect. Otherwise, they default straight back into taking control. And they have to know themselves. They have to be open to learning and humble and all the rest of it, things we haven't been in the past. The community has to learn how to solve their own problems, how to critically reflect, and so on, and how to speak up for themselves, because they've been told from a young age, many of our communities, that they must just keep quiet and they have nothing to add. And so we have to learn how to work together, because we haven't done that before. So that's the framework we use. And then if you look, I said we're working in action learning groups. So if you're looking at this is the work of the action learning group: relationship building, learning to trust, share, and support each other, but also critical reflection on self to increase self-awareness, etc., and improving your own practice. Opposite to that is critical reflection in a group on the process and on the progress, and then also crafting personal visions into a collaborative one, and deciding on the research goals. So this is just a way to explain what we're doing the whole time. So the action learning group is a self-study, if you like, group. It's a group of people who are studying on their own, bringing it back to the group, working on a shared vision together, and so on. And that's what they're doing. So that is what we're doing. And then some of the questions they're asking in themselves, not all, but some. Just an example: if you're in an action research group, you should be asking, what process should we follow to bring a stronger research group? What skills and knowledge do we need to bring? And what contextual factors hampering your process? What roles do we need to take on? What do we need to do? For instance, this is maybe the university researchers to become better facilitators of this process, but also community partners. And so, they keep a reflective diary and keep on reflecting on things like that. So to come to my final slide, which is what the title was. So a whole title about something you only see one slide on. But basically, we have the outcome of the research project, which was to answer 3 questions. First one was, how do we develop ethical processes suited to CBR that uphold the universal ethical principles, but still allow for the implementation of recognition, participation, and decision-making throughout? Second one, how can we build the capacity of academics to conduct CBR, because we don't have that? If we're going in and conducting research that we're not trained to do, or we don't understand, it's unethical. And thirdly, how do we ensure that the learning and development community partners are recognized, not just our learning? So we have to start with the researchers on the left-hand side there. Critical reflection on our own positionality, competence development on our attitudes, our skills, our knowledge. Why am I doing this? How am I doing this? Constant reflection. And then again, in the next cycle, when the forming reflexive partnerships, constantly reflecting on that again, setting up an action learning set, a core research project group. It's the same process of critical reflection. Then only moving on to the third cycle of generating and analyzing and disseminating knowledge change. If you miss out the first 2, you'll end up doing community-placed research and not community-based research. And the values that surround you can add to these: solidarity, integrity, reciprocity, respect, love, etc. surround the whole process the whole time. So basically, the first cycle is maybe akin to more a preparation cycle before entering the field, because if you don't do that, you'll go into the field and, as I said, just default. And I think it's based on the assumptions that came, or the learning that came out of the book, is contained in the last chapter of the book. Is one, you can't assume that any researchers in a CBR partnership, whether they're from community, university, government, whatever, they know how to do CBRs. CBRs are participatory paradigm uncommon among researchers who haven't been exposed to the idea of democratic practice, and it's striving to generate knowledge to underpin social action for positive change, not just to contribute to the disciplinary fields. So you really have to develop researchers' capacity to conduct CPR. It's a necessary starting point. And then the second learning was that this socio-historical oppression has negatively impacted on the psyche and the capabilities of certain population, leading to a loss of self-belief, etc. So you need to spend time building that up again. And if you involve students in this process, by critical service learning, it also improves the social responsible citizenness of the university. If you include the students from a vulnerable population on this themselves, then you'll be able to go back to the communities to bring about change, like one of the case studies in the book shows very well from Tanzania. And secondly, you're requiring students from more privileged communities to work with people and really learn what life is like in South Africa for the less privileged, and that will make them better professionals and change their whole attitudes and purpose in life, I hope. And the more the students and researchers do this, the more university committees and so on will have to find a way to support them. So will eventually lead to institutional change. So basically, and I'm very sorry, I think I underestimated my time or overestimated or whatever. I'll be very interactive, and I don't know if there's time for questions, but thank you. I hope that's right, Irish, but thank you. And I have to say this because the research was funded. So thank you very much for this.
Welcome you, Lesley. It also befalls me to thank you at this stage. And I was trying to make notes about just one or two points I wanted to include in the thanks, and I've almost run out of paper. But I think the thing that really struck me, because I have moved a number of times between disciplines, and I'm currently now in a fairly new discipline, is the notion of social justice as a praxis, and how I suppose the dominant discourse around social justice tends to relate to big social issues, and yet sometimes they're the very small things that happen in our communities every day. And the ways in which action research can address the inequities in our practices and in the communities we work with is in itself a huge social justice practice. And praxis. So, I think that's something to take away from that makes it relatable to all other contexts. And I'm so glad, that you couched it in those terms. And, the terms that we all understand in classrooms: collective meaning making, giving voice to minority groups, to build the strong foundations before we start the actual bit of research, that we negotiate in the field before we actually start working there. So, I just found the whole thing just a wonderful refreshment as well of so many values that I believe we all hold dear as action researchers. And I'm just saying, I'm sure I've seen comments and questions throughout this popping up in the chat.
Jackie?
That was great, Lesley. I just loved it for a number of reasons. One, my work isn't generally with communities now. Most of it is I mentor individual, researchers around the world. But by influencing them, then they are influencing their communities. For example, Parvati in Nepal, she's having a massive influence now, which is really very encouraging. I have an interest in particular because I'm coming to South Africa in February, and I've been trying to read about local conditions and about the culture, which has been a real focus of mine the last few years, trying to understand, for example, Nepalese cultures and their philosophies behind it. So you briefly mentioned Ubuntu. I've read the definitions, but you live it. So can you just talk for a minute about what's meant by Ubuntu?
I was actually told that the other day. A colleague of mine, an African colleague of mine, I can't remember what platform we were in, but he was talking about my work, and he says, this worked, and he's also doing it. is really decolonizing. It's bringing an African perspective in through Ubuntu and so on. And I think that's our values. You're all doing Ubuntu. You just don't call it that because you're not in Africa. Ubuntu means, I am because you are. So as I said, it's a relational ontology. We cannot exist without each other. And in the same process, if you do something to destroy the planet, for instance, it affects me too. So we all have to work together, and we're all in it together. Unfortunately, in South Africa, Ubuntu is not being lived out in our communities because of the scarcity of resources. I see it disappearing. People are competing and actually killing each other for scarce resources. So we need to bring that back. And it's never really been in the university in South Africa. Our universities are very hierarchical, and all that kind of value outages that go with being in a university without going into it too much. So Ubuntu, yes, and I think it's something that appeals to Jack as well. He always mentions that this is what we're doing. You're all doing Ubuntu. It's caring for and realizing we're all in this together, and we have to be empathic and not just be empathic, but actually work to support each other actively. And it's not really happening here at the moment. So I think it's even more important to reintroduce that to it.
What we usually do in the NEARI group, we'll split into breakout rooms and continue the discussion and then come back to the plenary. So if that's okay with everyone, I'm just going to assign you randomly into groups, and then you can also access the Wakelet site, continue the conversation for 10 minutes, and then we'll